And the 50th anniversary Tony Award for Best New Musical goes to...
And the Best New Musical of 1998 is... 2004 Tony Award for Best Musical goes to...
The 2008 Tony Award goes to...
And the Tony goes to...
All right, hey guys, it's Chris Schembra and Oliver Roth here. We're broadcasting from our studio in Midtown Manhattan, the beautiful New York City. Spring is in the air and it's Tony Award season. I and Oliver are producing partners at OHenry Productions. Between us, our shows have garnered 10 Tony Awards, 5 Emmy Awards, and a Grammy. It's been one heck of a good run, and it brings me back to this point last year. Oliver Roth, my partner, correctly for 2 years in a row has been leading the world in Tony Awards predictions. This year we correctly predicted 102 of the 109 nominations, and last year Oliver correctly predicted 22 of the 24 Tony Award winners. That's a 91.6% batting average. That gets you a $15 million a year contract in baseball, my favorite sport. Oliver, it's great having you on the radio with us.
Yeah, it's great being here.
I want to lead right into what we have going on this year. It's tough to ignore the elephant in the room. We got Hamilton.
That is correct.
Smashing the record of 16 Tony Award nominations.
Yeah.
What is that like for them?
That's got to be amazing. I mean, the producers and Billy Elliot both had 15. They've got to be pretty happy. And they also did it in a year where, for the last 2 years in a row now, the sound design of a musical and a play categories are no longer awards that are given, which means that they had one less of an opportunity to get nominated. I have no doubts that it would have gotten nominated in that category, so we would have seen probably 17.
And it's not too shabby of a year on Broadway. We have a bunch of other great nominations. It's a beautiful industry to be a part of. It's a great art that we get to bring to the world on a daily basis.
That's true.
Now that brings me to another of the year's top story, the snubs.
Yeah.
I mean, here we go. American Psycho gets leads in nominations at the Outer Critics, and what do they have? Three nominations for the Tony Awards?
Yeah, they were the leading new musical in terms of nominations for the Outer Critics Circle and the Drama Desk Awards. It's important to note that Hamilton, which was eligible and won a lot of those awards last year for the run at the public, weren't eligible to be nominated this year. But still, you would think that a show that's getting those voters to kind of praise its claims would also get the Tony voters to praise its claims, or the Tony nominating committee to praise its claim, and they didn't. They got 2 categories, both design categories. I mean, you've seen the show. The design is pretty amazing.
Phenomenal.
But there are certainly, I mean, I think the biggest 2 categories, there are probably 3 biggest categories that I would say were huge snubs. Of course, Best Musical, which generally a show that's leading in nominations from other awards would receive a nomination in that category. Benjamin Walker was probably one of the biggest snubs for lead actor. He's on stage the whole time and kind of he's been a part of their kind of press and buzz, and then the direction as well, I think.
Well, I want to, speaking of Benjamin Walker, I want to get back to lead actor, which is an interesting category. Later on. Now, what other shows overall do you think have not gotten their fair shot?
One thing I was kind of interested in was that An Act of God didn't get any nominations. Normally, that would not have been strange at all because they were closed by the time September rolled around. But I felt strongly that the decision to bring it back with Sean Hayes was due not only because it had relative success out on the West Coast with Sean Hayes, but also because it was not the strongest year for new play comedies, and bringing it back in could have potentially gotten them in the eyes of the nominating committee. I expected them to pull off 1 or 2 nominations, and I also think Jesse Tyler Ferguson and Fully Committed not getting nominated, especially for their set. That was an interesting snub. And then I think you can't talk about snubs without talking about Audra McDonald, who bats 1,000 in terms of
greatest of all time.
Yeah, and her not getting nominated was really something.
Between Audra not getting nominated and an act of God coming back twice, or coming back once, performing twice in one sit. That's a big, big, big story. But there's bigger stories out there. Actually, just this week, there was a big one that caught my attention, and that's everything going on with Bright Star and Joey Parnes. I mean, he lead produced Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, which I was honored to be a part of as an investor. You read that story. What are your thoughts on what's going on there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting risk that Joey is taking. Joey Parnes took out a priority loan on Bright Star in order to keep it afloat until the Tony Awards. If you've looked at their box office on Broadway World, they're in the
30s.
They're in the 30% of capacity, and so their ticket sales aren't paying for just the operational cost of the show. They would have to fold, and the article said they would have to fold before the Tony Awards without pumping more money into the show. So it's an interesting strategy, and obviously the people in that room are the only people that really know whether it was the right one to take. I think that there's something to be said about coming this far and wanting the show to keep running long enough to see how you do at the Tonys. I think that the problem is I personally don't really see them doing so well because they're up against Hamilton in every category. Maybe they beat out Alex Lacamoire for orchestrations. I think that would be crazy. I really don't see a huge opening for them. I think a performance on the broadcast will bump them up a bit, but I just don't see it changing things.
So, I mean, they're not wicked with Idina Menzel. That was a performance.
Right, yeah. Avenue Q won the award, but Idina flew in the air on national television. And
you can't fly in Bright Star, can you?
No, there's no flying.
No.
There's a house that gets pushed around the stage.
Ooh, that could be good.
And there's some good choreography, not Tony-nominated choreography, but some good choreography.
Well, I trust the heck out of Joey Parnes. He led Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder to our Tony Award wins, but this is a ballsy move with Bright Star.
It is really putting everything out.
That reminds me, this time last year, or 2014, when A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, we had just gotten the nominations. We had some abysmal numbers as well. I mean, we were in the 30s and 40s, and the nominations came out, and then that famous song by Pharrell Williams called Happy had come out with the Despicable Me soundtrack, and we did that cool little PR gimmick with having our whole cast backstage do Happy. What was Disaster they just did?
Yeah, so Disaster had posted closing notice right after nominations, I guess expecting maybe that it would get some more nominations, and then they were nominated in only one category, which was featured actress in a musical, Jennifer Simard, who was great in the show, and they did a Playable exclusive Facebook Live video of her number. It was the only thing they could possibly have done to try to bump up their chances.
Do you know how that worked? Did it work?
I mean, I think it was viewed by a lot of people. There was, for a short time, a kind of not a nationwide trend, but a kind of theater trend of a hashtag that was like something about letting Disaster perform on the Tony Awards. I would prefer to see American Psycho, which is open and has 2 nominations, perform. I think that's a more likely possibility than to see Disaster perform. So it did something, but she's up against Renee and Hamilton and Danielle Brooks in The Color Purple, Jane Krakowski.
Tough category.
It's a tough category.
So speaking of PR, now we all know what Hamilton's been doing with their actors on the P. What's that?
So, actually, 2 nights ago, I believe it was, Daveed Diggs was on Jimmy Fallon. And Leslie had been on Seth Meyers earlier this year, but, I mean, obviously, when you're on the earlier of the late shows, that's a higher viewership.
I mean, we haven't seen that pop cult phenomenon since Rent.
Yeah.
Or
to have a first-time Broadway actor without a film career or anything, be on late night television is really awesome that they let him do that, and also definitely shows us that Hamilton believes David is their ticket to a win in that category, which I think is totally true.
Well, that's interesting because he's up against two of his castmates in one single category, but that brings me back to the most interesting category, I think, of this year. Talk to me about the lead actor in a musical
lead actor
category.
In a musical is definitely an interesting category. There are 3 Hamilton nominees in featured actor, and there are 2, Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Burr, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who plays Hamilton and wrote Hamilton. And it's interesting when that happens. If you remember last year in the featured actress in a musical category, Fun Home had 3 nominees for Judy Kuhn, Cindy Lucas, and Emily Skeggs, and it ended up that Ruthie Ann Miles from The King and I won that category. She did fantastically and I think deserved it, but I think one thing that helped that win, the Ruth Ann Miles win, was that the Fun Home contingency of voters was split between Cindy Lucas, this bright, young, really young, sensational actress, and Judy Kuhn, the kind of veteran Broadway actress. So I think that that's something that we could possibly see in a very interesting way this year in lead actor in a musical. You've got Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is probably the biggest star of exclusively Broadway, in my lifetime. When In the Heights happened, he had some acclaim, and now Hamilton's the biggest. I'd say the most well-known musical since Spider-Man, but a very different story, and it's well known in a positive light as opposed to in a negative light. So
it's also the top bang for the buck producing. I mean, they're putting up gross potential profit numbers that smash it. Their gross percentage profit per week is at 125%. The closest, which I thought would never be touched, was the Book of Mormon, which averages 115. And that I thought would never beat the big blockbuster Wicked, which averages 105. I've never seen anything like Hamilton.
It's insane, and a lot of that is because Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote an amazing score and book, and it's also the performances of everyone out there. But I think the thing about Lynn's going to walk away with 2 Tony Awards, absolutely. I mean, he's going to win Best Book, he's going to win Best Score. Does he need? I think the voters might say,
does he need
the Best Actor? Is he the Best Actor? Leslie Odom Jr. arguably makes that show as much as, from a performance standpoint, as much if not more than Lynn does. And he's also never won a Tony before. Lynn has for In the Heights. Leslie Odom Jr. is definitely, I think, the more likely of the 2 of them to win the award. But you will have that split, which means that there's potentially a chance for a non-Hamilton nominee to win. The interesting thing is that vote, I believe, would be split too. I mean, Danny Bernstein has been nominated, I think, 6 times before without a win. It's his first real time being the leading man in a classic musical, and he has the kind of story of it's his time, almost the Kelly O'Hara story. The King and I might not have been the show that she really deserved it for, but she has deserved it in her history, so she's the one that wins it. That's, I think, what Danny Bernstein has going for him. At the same time, in that category, you have Alex Brightman, who's this kind of out-of-nowhere sensation in School of Rock that is a bundle of energy on stage, doing an awesome job. I think you have 4 really strong contenders for that award. And in a year where Best Musical has been done since August, I would almost like to see the lead actor in a musical be the last award given out of the broadcast, because that's the race that I'm most interested in.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I'm happy for Broadway, and we've got a great race ahead of us. So, folks tuning in, this has been Chris Schembra and Oliver Roth. Stick with us. We're going to be a great source for Tony Awards coverage and through on and after the Tony Awards. We're going to have some of Broadway's hottest stars, some of the brightest minds, and we're going to have some really interesting conversations. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at OHenryProductions.com. Thanks for listening.